I am very happy to have a great guest today, Jakob. We met many years ago, actually, when you were visiting the daily office in Chile before doing a big hike in bicycle across the Andes. So he has a lot of stamina. Jakob is one of the partners of BIG, the Bjarke Ingels Group, one of today's most successful architecture practices that is doing many projects around the world, but more than quantity is quality. It's an office that has a very conscious agenda about sustainability. And the complexity and scale of the projects that they are involved in require that they deal with increasing complexities that can only be solved with the unique expertise that they develop inside. A very, I would say, like transversal or horizontal type of knowledge that is integrated, because I think today in architecture that is what we need, bring everything together to deliver projects that are integral. So in this complex landscape, there is something that is called Big Ideas, that is directed by Jakob, that is, in a way, the responsible of making reality the castles in the sky that Big is designing. So I am very happy to have you here to tell us more of what Big Ideas is.
Thank you very much. This is really exciting because I've been sort of heading our product development department for now 8 years and been at Salone, and I think this is the first year where, you know, I feel like I'm getting more and more into the product design community, which is truly exciting for architects because it is, in a way, we're designing in a very similar way, but it's also very different. I brought some slides for you all today that I'm gonna show. I'm gonna run quickly through some of our ideas. Our office is currently around 700 architects. We have a head office in Copenhagen, an office in New York, London, and Barcelona. There's a little bit of lag from my Bluetooth here. So this is the Barcelona office. We do projects on all scales, so all the way from the small lamp through small houses, small museums, up to larger projects. And behind the flowers here, we're even doing a plan for the planet. We call it the master planet. We have completed over the last couple of years quite a lot of projects, and we have many more in constructions. All of them are sort of trying to achieve and live up to the highest standards within sustainability. And when we give birth to ideas, it's almost like an evolution of design where different concepts are merged into one idea that essentially becomes the winner of these ideas. We have several departments inside our company that we call the Big Leap, which primarily stands for landscape engineering, architecture, and products, where the engineering department ensures that we can do projects at a very high standard, completely integrated with engineering, where the landscape department ensures that landscapes is not only something that you find outside the building, but it's something that is truly integrated within the architecture. In this case, it's the Spiral in New York City. Then we have the interiors department. I'm waving my Bluetooth signal here. Oh my God, it's far away. Don't know if it, there we go. And we have a sustainability department that calculates and simulates the conditions around our buildings. So everything from wind, energy, daylight, and so forth. Of course, an interior department that designs for especially the public spaces where we have visitors coming most often. And then we have a product development department that do designs for our buildings. So as you know, designing can be, ideally it should look like this, where we do some research, ideation, prototyping, product development, and finally you have a product. But in reality, the process is a very sort of, you could call it messy, a lot of back and forth. So what we focus on all throughout is the big idea, finding the essence of a concept, and then going through. For example, we are doing a series of lamps with Archimede. Here it's the alphabet of light that essentially is a product that consists of only quarter circles and a straight line. So, and in order to show that you can use only these two elements to design everything, we decided to call it the alphabet of light, basically shown here that all letters in the alphabet are represented here. A couple of years ago, we installed this one here in Milan. Since then, the product has been developed into an outdoor version so that we can create larger outdoor installations using what we call the La Linea. And this year we launched a 25-meter long version, which gives us a lot more freedom so that you can almost do cursive letters, writing your name or your company and so forth. We have designed a smart lock called Friday, which essentially is aiming at minimizing the footprint of the object on the door. So the battery being the largest component in this retrofit door, and then we squeeze the typical doorknob around the battery, which gives you this sort of optimized shape that you see here, and we can then cover it with different kind of metallic parts. So instead of having blinking lights, it's just doing the thing that it needs to do. It can help you unlock the door. And this new version called Duo is launching this year, and it comes in a variety of different finishes. See here. Sorry about this. We have designed the VIA chair, which is inspired by which was designed to our building, the VIA building. Essentially, this chair for Fritz Hansen that has two backrests, so that you can sit in many different ways, which launched a couple of years ago. And we really try to use our architecture as sort of the birthing ground for our ideas and our concepts. Then I brought one of our pieces of architecture, the Urban Rigger, which in theory is kind of like a very large scale product, where we're taking used shipping containers, reusing them, cutting some holes in it. Then we use 9 of them that we stack on a barge and organize around an internal courtyard. So this essentially has a roof terrace, PVs on one of the roofs and a green terrace on the last one, with a protected courtyard in the center. So each of these urban riggers, as we call them, have PVs on the roof that drives these seawater cooling or heating. So and all of these urban riggers, if they are tied together, works as a little network. So if one of them is having a party, the blue one down here, they can all kind of help share their energy between them. And this is the first one we built. Now we have 6 of them on the harbor of Copenhagen. We're sort of zooming into them here. You see how they can be connected together, and we essentially have small bridges spanning from urban rigger to urban rigger, creating almost like a little urban rigger neighborhood in any harbor. And if we zoom a little bit closer to the urban rigger from the coast, it really has this raw appearance of the shipping containers. But once you move in, you have a sort of a green garden protected with some glass that takes the majority of the wind in the harbor areas. It even has its own ladder from the sea, so that you can take a swim in the morning. And inside each of the 16 units are around 40 square meters a piece for students. Are sort of covered in wood and gives perfect views of the surroundings. So of course the whole concept of the urban rigger is that it's a temporary structure that you can sail it around if you are in need of housing or different types of refugee crisis or something. You can actually ship and create an entire city anywhere around the globe. Finally, I brought one of the main big ideas that we've been working on for quite a while, that together with Virgin Hyperloop One. The Hyperloop system is essentially a transportation system that takes the advantages of shipping, combining it with the individual freedom of the automobile, with the mass transportation capacity of the trains, with the speed of flight. This is combined into a new type of transportation that's called the Hyperloop. Essentially, this idea of a new paradigm shift within transportation. The Hyperloop system has been tried a few times in the 1800th century in London and in New York. But at that time, the technology was not ready to make it work, so the system would essentially leak. A few years back, 8 years ago now, Elon Musk proposed this idea again because now the technology has matured enough. So we joined the company when they were testing their technology out in the desert. So essentially the Hyperloop is a perfect city center to city center transportation at speeds as close to the speed of sound, which is 1,100 kilometers an hour. You can take 50,000 passengers an hour in one tube. It has a cost of only 60% compared to high-speed rails, and it runs purely on electricity. Of course, these systems, because of the high speed, needs a lot of acceleration and deceleration, so it's not good for close distances within cities. But if you travel from a city to another city, a bit like a plane, but without the hassle of checking in and out. At these high speeds, you really have to consider the turns within the landscape, because otherwise you're going to be sort of pulled by the G-forces into the turns. Another advantage is you can also go uphill very easily, because it's it's electronic, sort of essentially a maglev train system. And one of the first routes we've been looking at is a route between Helsinki and Stockholm, where the travel time would be less than half an hour from the city center to the city center without checking in luggage. You just step on, because there's constantly another part going. You sort of completely eliminate, and you bring the capitals of, in this case, Europe together, but it could be rolled out anywhere in the world. Here's how we imagine the stations looking, where you enter from the outside in the center of Stockholm. We located a few sites. Here you enter in, and you find a part that want to take you to the destination that you want to go to. So initially, of course, it would be a connection between Stockholm and Helsinki, but over time, this system would expand and take you further into Europe. So here could be a system between Oslo and Copenhagen that we've also been looking at, but there's no limitations of how this could over time spread out and potentially even replace rail. So Virgin Hyperloop One have been testing, doing tests in a test track, a 500-meter long test tube where they essentially suck out all the air from the tube and create a vacuum. Inside here, they've been testing vehicles, and we've been asked to design the first human pod for the system. And this is what this pod looks like, essentially sort of a high-speed two-passenger vehicle that in this test tube, of course, was accelerating at very high speeds and decelerating very quickly, but it was kind of proving the whole system with pure vacuum electromagnetic propulsion. So it comes as a kit of parts with the pod in the center, the pressure cabin, so that the passengers wouldn't suffocate. This is through the design process when we were looking at how to sort of create a very choppy little volume and make it look like a high-speed volume. And essentially, we designed it so that the front acts as the access hatch. Here's a visualization of it going into the tube itself. And here, when it's rolled out. So the fabricator was creating this little high-speed devil in Texas. Here you see how the entrance, those warps, becomes the steps that takes you into the cabin itself. Through the prototyping phase and the modeling of all of this, it was sort of carefully tested. And also one of the challenges was how to fit the seating into it, because everything had to go through the small hatch in the front. Here you see it being installed inside, and finally, when everything was in place, we installed a mirror in the roof to make the pod appear bigger. And finally, the day arrived when the CTO of Virgin Hyperloop One and one of his colleagues were jumping into the small, here you have Josh Geigel and his colleague Sarah, and they were testing it out and proving that the system actually worked. And I think that was my 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jakob. And thank you for taking us into this journey from simulation, product design, and very bold ideas of our future. As you mentioned with the Hyperloop, this is not something new, because it has been in our ideas, in our science fiction, utopias or dystopias of the future. But now it is becoming a reality. The same, we have been thinking about floating cities. And even here you show us a little unit. It is also something that Big is working on in South Korea. So I want to ask you how it is inside Big to be putting yourselves into this edge, trying to think about what comes next and taking the responsibility of doing something that no one else has done.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting position we have as designers and architects, is that we are imagining the future that we would like to live in, both the buildings that we would like to inhabit, sleep in, the sport theaters, the bars as we're sitting in here. It's our imagination that is creating the spaces and the objects that we would like to use for the future. I like to bring out this example of 10 years ago, we won a competition to design the looks of a power plant in Copenhagen. And at that point, of course, everybody would say, because Denmark is flat as a pancake, that skiing in Denmark doesn't make any sense. But today, 10 years after, now we ski on power plants in the center of Copenhagen. And if you ask a Copenhagener today, it's the most natural thing. It's a part of the Copenhagen culture that you ski on power plants. So I think we as architects and designers have this almost like superpower that we can, all the things that we imagine, if we have the right clients and collaborators that are willing to go onto this journey together with us, we can truly shape the future that we would like to live in.
So from almost teletransporting ourselves to living in the oceans, which other things that are from these dystopian or utopian futures do you think that we will see reality soon?
I'm glad you mentioned it, but I think space travel is something truly exciting. And I think for all of us, it seems like a little bit of a distant thing, but it's going to happen sooner than we think. And NASA is working on creating a mission where they want to bring people back to the moon, and this time to stay, a little bit like the International Space Station. So within the next 5 years, we're going to have astronauts back on the surface on the moon. The first one being a female stepping her foot on the surface. The mission is called Artemis. Artemis is the sister name of Apollo. So this will be the Artemis mission, and within the next 10 years, more and more astronauts will sort of step foot on the planet and will need to live there. So we've been working with NASA about designing the first sort of real building made from lunar soil, so moon dust that we put into 3D printers, and then we are 3D printing the home, because it doesn't make sense to sort of bring all the building materials from Earth. It's going to be very costly, a lot of rocket fuel, if you will. But we actually have an abundance of building materials ready on the surface, so that we can build future cities on the moons and even Mars and beyond.
Well, our industry is very complex in the sense that needs to move atoms, not bits. This is not like a fintech in which with lines of code we can really revolutionize all systems. We really need to displace things, and as you say, there is a lot of energy involved sometimes. But again, going to this like utopias, many people from outside the world of architecture always ask me, like, when are we going to be able to print houses? And it's something that we thought it was very distant in the future, but now it's happening. Big is involved in 3D printing, even a neighborhood now.
Yeah, so our the company that we are collaborating with on the moon base, they are also their main business is essentially printing 3D printing houses on Earth. So we are 3D printing now the first villas, and one of the benefits of doing so is that it happens without human intervention. Of course, somebody will need to control it, but as soon as we get better and better at optimizing this process, we can very quickly sort of 3D print entire neighborhoods. We can send out a 3D printer to remote sites where they are in desperate need of housing, and we can 3D print, essentially protection from the environments if it's a very hot climate and so on. Yeah.
No, because with this, we're seeing how architecture can scale. Architecture has been super hard because it is atoms, but now we're in the verge of a tremendous revolution, and I'm super happy that you were able to show us a little bit of what is happening on the edge. And well, about this 3D company, I invite you on ArchDaily because Icon 3D was chosen as one of the best young practices, even if they are not an architecture office per se, but we say, this is what the future of architecture should be, so I invite you to see it. Anybody wants to ask Jakob a question about utopias, the castles in the sky that become real?
Hello. Okay. Whoa. I'm a product designer, and it was really inspiring about all the designs about future to hear. And as you said about like it feels like having superpower to imagine everything in the future. I was wondering what you would most care about when you do the designs for the future, and what's your own kind of drive for doing new designs again and again. And just to mention, it was very happy when you mentioned that the hybrid cities are actually going to be in South Korea, I think I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from South Korea, so I was just happy to hear.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the floating cities, which is called Oceanic, that you mentioned, the first one, it's a collaboration with the UN that we're doing a floating city in Korea. I think what sort of inspires me and the office in general is the idea. So, you know, it's not about designing an ergonomic shape. It's actually trying to do something more than just doing another piece of design. Because one way of being sustainable is, of course, by choosing sustainable materials, which we are all doing. But I think fundamentally the most important thing is probably to design something that transcends time, that something that is timeless, that in 10 years from now, or even 20 years or 30 years from now, good design is actually very sustainable, because you don't then replace a very good chair that you bought 30 years ago, because it's still relevant and very good design. But if you design without intention and without a great idea, then very quickly design can be almost like fashion, a trend that is maybe cool today, but very quickly fashion also changes. So you have to have almost like an anchor somewhere else. And for us, that is the big idea, as we call it, that you know, that it really is not so much about the shape, but it's also driven by the functionality and the idea.
Hola, good afternoon. Taking into account the situation now with the climate change, everything that is happening, and from the Utopia point of view and your experience, what do you recommend or your advice to a company, manufacturing company, or to an architect or designer to do in order to contribute to a better evolution of the world from the sustainability point of view? Something that you want to remark or give us some kind of advice?
Yeah, of course. I think there is quite a difference between architecture and product development. Within architecture, probably if we look around here, some of these buildings were built 20, 30 years ago, and are not insulated very good, which means that when you heat them up or cool down, you spend a lot of energy doing that. And it's worth considering tearing down the entire project and building up new, but insulating it really well. Because within 10 years, you maybe have saved all the energy that you have spent building it. So renovating and making more climate friendly buildings is a very good idea. And in a way, the same goes for design. Product design is, first of all, of course, you need to choose the right materials. But I think also, as I mentioned before, you need to design timeless designs. You know, you shouldn't just spit out new designs. You should be very careful about designing stuff that can last more than a couple of years. And if it can last, that I think it's actually a much better way of being sustainable than doing another chair made out of felt or something, because making something truly sustainable also requires energy. You need transportation, packaging. The guys handling also needs a salary, which in theory also is an energy resource, and the whole wheel rolls around. But the second you design something that lasts centuries, you're actually not tapping into this. It becomes a very sustainable product. And I think that's what all designers should keep in mind, is that it has to live longer than just kind of the fashion.
Thank you, Jakob.